right, we'll go ahead and get started. Just some housekeeping for beginning. If you could all keep your guys' self-muted, and that's just to make sure that there's no feedback picked up and that you can hear all the material that's presented. At the end, we will have time for questions. So if you do have any questions, you can just type them in the chat box, and then I will get to them at the end. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. So today we're going to be talking about strategies that can help to improve compliance and cooperation with children at home. This is a really unprecedented time for a lot of families. So I just want to acknowledge that you guys are doing your best, and these are just some strategies that we hope will help you guys continue to do your best. You guys are being superstars right now, and we want to help continue with your guys' commitment to your children and give you guys some more tools for your ninja toolbox for parenting. Okay, so from today's training, we're hoping that you will understand some factors that can contribute to non-compliance, as well as understand and learn strategies to increase compliance and cooperation with instructions that you will be giving your children, and then also understand and learn strategies to increase compliance for transitions. That can be a really hard thing for our children, for all children, regardless of developmental disability, but especially for children with disabilities. Transitions and changes in routine can be really difficult. So when we think about compliance, it's really just this fancy word for following or cooperating with instructions. So you give Johnny a command or an instruction, and he's supposed to follow through with that. Hopefully on the first time. That's like our goal, that we give an instruction and the first time our child is following through with it and we're not getting in a back and forth arguing. When we think about some of the foundations that go into compliance, we have three cornerstones really: sleep, exercise, and routine. When we think about sleep, I know there was another mini session on that one of our fellows, Natalie, went over all the different types of tips to think about when we're thinking about sleep for our children. But really, if we're not getting enough sleep, it's a lot harder to follow through with commands and instructions. One, our concentration might not be there, and two, you're irritable and cranky, and I don't want to do anything that you're telling me to do. So really for our children, when we're thinking the age rate or the hours range based on age, but we're thinking about we want 10 to 12 hours of sleep per night for our children to really make sure that they're rested and they have the full energy and the ability to concentrate with the things that we are wanting them to learn and take in from us. Exercise can also be a really nice way to increase a child's ability to cooperate with instructions. If you think about it, if you are sitting at your desk all day and you just have all this pent-up energy, you get fidgety, you get distracted, it's harder to concentrate on what you're supposed to be doing. So being able to build in those moments of exercise, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, at different points throughout the, like multiple times throughout the day, that can go a long way for helping a child to then be able to reset, come back, and concentrate on what they're supposed to be doing and the tasks that you're giving them. Routines also are super, super important for helping increase compliance and cooperation with instructions. And when right now with COVID, a lot of routines have been they're non-existent because this is a really, again, an unprecedented time for a lot of people. So what can be really helpful is to create your new normal and your new routine, whatever that might look like for your family. And even if you're just starting with a one part of your day and structuring that part of your day, maybe it's the bedtime routine, like in this picture here, you're just figuring out how to structure that time so that your child knows what to expect. It's a lot easier to follow through with instructions when they're established from the start and a child knows what to expect and kind of knows the flow of things. So those are really the cornerstones that we're looking at when we want to think about how am I going to best help my child comply and cooperate with the instructions that I'm giving them. Having enough sleep, getting some exercise and ability to move their body, get pent up energy out, and then having an established routine so they know what to expect. Other factors that can impact compliance, I had mentioned this earlier, but not paying attention. Sometimes it might seem like our kids are paying attention, but it's going in one ear and out the other. I am very guilty of this as well. So we always want to make sure, and I'll go into this a little bit more detail, that we do have our children's full attention, because even if we think they might be listening, they might really not, and it could be just something in their environment and really cool happened, and like they were listening initially, but then they missed the rest of the instructions that you gave them. Different biological factors such as being sick, being hungry, I mentioned this. Hunger is a really real thing. I suffer from this myself. I do this a lot, but when I'm hangry, all I can focus on is eating, and it's like the one thing on my mind, and so it's hard to follow through on anything else. So wanting to make sure basic biological factors like that are in check. And then probably one of the biggest things that contributes to non-compliance or not listening to instructions is that we're giving a child a command or an instruction for something that they don't want to do. No one likes doing things that aren't fun for them. So what we're really going to talk about is how to increase the cooperation for doing some of these tasks that are probably a little bit more non-preferred or not fun, like schoolwork or cleaning up their toys, or transitioning. I know just on Friday had a lovely presentation by Amanda Fowler, one of our LEND trainees, and she went over this model, but this is just a refresher. So when we think about non-compliance, it really is a learned behavior. It is something that the child, through experience, has learned from their environment, that they do certain things that they get out of doing a task that they don't want to do. So when we think about this ABC model, the A stands for antecedent, which is really just a fancy word for the trigger or event that comes right before a behavior that we're seeing. The B is the behavior in the model, and then the C is the consequence. What happens right after the behavior that is helping to strengthen or keep that behavior happening. So keeping the non-compliance or the not listening or the refusing to do instructions. So this is just a little table that kind of shows what this ABC model in action can look like. And what can be helpful to do is to start with the behavior and then work forward and backward. So for example, the behavior is that Johnny threw himself on the floor and screamed for 6 minutes. Well, what happened right before that? Mom or dad asked Johnny to pick up his toys before dinner. And Johnny didn't want to do that. So, and with the behavior that he did in response to get out of that, to not comply with the instruction, was the throwing himself on the floor and screaming. And then so what happened was mom or dad picked up the toys for him. We don't want you to do this. When you give an instruction, we don't want you to then, if there is this fit or if there is this fight about it, we don't want you to do the instruction that you gave them, because that's teaching the child that if I do a certain behavior, I'm getting out of it. And what we really want to do is instead provide you strategies that are going to help prevent some of those behaviors and increase that cooperation for the instruction that you are giving them. Okay. So when we're thinking about teaching compliance or cooperation, and compliance and cooperation can really use those terms interchangeably, is that we're going to teach the child a new habit and we're going to follow through on the instruction. I think what happens a lot of time, and I'm guilty of this as well with people in my life, is asking them to do something or instructing them to do something, and then not following through, like doing it myself, or giving in. And then again, that's teaching the person that if I do a certain behavior, I get out of it. What we want is to change that through some steps that I'm going to talk about. Oops, skipped a slide. So one of the first steps to teaching compliance is making sure that you have your child's attention. So when you're first starting with this, when you're thinking about teaching compliance for instructions, is standing really close to your child to really make sure that they're listening to you, that you have their full attention. And you can get their attention in multiple ways. Can call the child's name, can tap them on the shoulder, or depending on the child's comfort level with eye contact, prompting them to look at you. It's kind of like a 3-tiered process that you can do when you're giving instructions. You can start verbally first. So, hey, Johnny, I want you to clean up your Legos. If you're not getting a response, you can move to then tapping Johnny on the shoulder. Hey, Johnny, I want you to clean up your Legos. If you're still not getting the response that you're wanting, and I'm going to talk about this some more in our last step for compliance, is that you can physically guide the child to do what you're asking them to do. What's important to remember, though, is a lot of our children with developmental disabilities, they have a slower processing speed. So when you give that first instruction, you're probably going to have to wait longer than what you would think, than what you think you would normally have to. So it can take up to, for some kids, 20 seconds to really process and respond. So they might be wanting to comply with your instruction and follow through. It's just taking them some time to think through what you actually said to them. So don't be afraid to give your child some time if they don't respond right away. And then if they don't, you can move through that tiered system of the verbal, getting their attention, the verbal plus the nonverbal tap, and then the physical guidance. Once you have your child's attention, you want to give the instruction. And this is something that I do all the time as well, that I have to like really catch myself. And once you learn it, it becomes easier, but making the statement and not asking, unless you're okay with your kid saying no, because you've given the option. So you're not wanting to offer them a choice. So instead of saying, Johnny, will you please pick up your toys? Where he could say, no, I will not pick up my toys. It's Johnny, pick up your Legos right now. And you're going to say it clearly so they know exactly what they're supposed to do. So it's not just pick up the toys. You're probably going to point and show them and say, pick up the Legos, put them in the box. You want to be very specific for what you want them to do. And depending on your child's level of processing, the steps that they can handle, I think a safe bet is to start with one step at a time. So pick up the dinosaurs, put them in the box. So you're really breaking it down for them. The next step, and this depends on the child as well, is providing physical guidance if they're struggling with moving along and cooperating with your instruction. So you always want to try to start with the minimum amount of physical guidance to help a child complete the task, but this can look different ways. It could be just putting your hands lightly on the child's back and kind of guiding them to the spot, like maybe it's the Legos on the floor, is guiding them on the back. It might be actually taking their hand and helping them pick up the toy and put it in the box. And so again, you'll want to start with the minimum amount, but if you're needing more, sometimes it is that hand-over-hand assistance that you're doing first to really help the child cooperate with the task. And then once the child starts to cooperate even more, you can start to fade that physical guidance, and all the while always praising them for their cooperation and the steps that they're doing. And so this is going back to the praise. And you want to be really, I'll talk about this more as well, but being really specific in the praise that you're giving, and do it immediately. Like when we think about reinforcement and praise, we usually want to do it within 1 second that the behavior has happened. And so once Johnny or once Katie picks up the toy, thank you so much, Katie, for picking up the toy. I really appreciate that. Or if it's using their inside voice, thank you, Johnny, so much for using your inside voice. I love how quiet you're being. Because when we provide praise, it's really teaching the child that as their immediate compliance, their immediate cooperation with the instruction that you have given them results in that immediate praise or immediate reinforcement. You also still want to praise the child even if they're only successful because of the physical guidance that you have given them, because they're still learning, like, oh, even though mom helped me put this toy away, I'm still getting praise for that. I'm still getting a reward. So they're making that connection. And some children too, for these type of tasks, we really want to use the verbal praise and the specific verbal praise, but sometimes kids will need initially like a sticker or a piece of candy, and you can pair that, but always make sure you're pairing it with the verbal praise, and you can eventually fade out that more tangible or hands-on reinforcement. Just some wrap up tips is for the cooperation training. You can start small, you can start easy, and then gradually increase your demands. So one thing that I really like to tell parents is start with tasks that you know that your kid readily already complies with, and then practice giving them that reinforcement when they follow through. So maybe your kid readily comes to the table for lunch or dinner because they love food. So immediately praising them when they do that the first time you ask. We also want to avoid allowing any escape behaviors that they might try to do to get out of doing the task, and avoid using timeout, because if you put them in timeout for not cleaning up their toys, well, then they're getting reinforced for not cleaning up their toys. So time away or timeouts actually reinforce the behavior that we don't want to see, instead of complying or following through with the instructions. What can also be helpful is using first then language. And I'll talk about this with transitions as well. But first pick up your toys, then you get to play video games. So it's not just like a no, it's never gonna happen. It's first you need to do what I want you to do, and then you get your reward. And then there's going to be times when the child is going to have to do things that they just don't want to do, and we want to teach them coping strategies for those types of situations. So that could be deep breathing, that could be having some type of transition object with them when they're upset. And based on time, I will come back to this example if we have time at the end, but it really goes through using some of these strategies to help a child who isn't wanting to comply with instructions, and the caregiver is using these first then strategies, is using verbal praise, and is using some physical guidance to help the child follow through with the instructions that she's giving. I mentioned this before, that we want to use reinforcement to help improve compliance and cooperation. So reinforcement is really rewards, things that keep us motivated to do things, and they're very individualized. A common example for adults is we come to our jobs because we're getting a paycheck. That's reinforcing for us, and we can use that paycheck to get a lot of the other things that we need. Verbal praise, social praise, attention from others is another type of reinforcement, and one that we, again, use a lot to help kids follow through with instructions and comply. Reinforcers, or things that are rewarding to people, are individualized and can change day to day. So one of the things that one of the psychologists always mentions at Cincinnati Children's is that, she really likes broccoli, but if you tell her to do something, she might not be, in that her reward is broccoli, she's not necessarily going to be motivated to work for it. Now, say it's like an extra bonus on the paycheck, that might be a little bit of a different thing. So it's important to pay attention to what your child is really motivated by. And again, thinking about if you're needing to pair like a toy or an activity or a sticker or something that they're really interested in with that verbal praise that you're giving them, and at least initially when we're giving them instructions. So using praise as reinforcement is something that we really want to focus on. And when we think about praise, it's combining attention with a very specific positive verbal statement. And why this is so important is because, again, it strengthens the behavior that you're wanting to see, so the cooperation with the instruction that you're giving. It helps build self-esteem in the child because you're providing a very specific labeled praise for something that they have done, that they themselves have been able to complete. It also helps strengthen the relationship between the child and the caregiver. So they're getting that positive reinforcement from someone who they really care about, who they love, that can be really reinforcing and strengthen the bond. And then it can also just lead to a more positive environment instead of a place that doesn't seem like that doesn't seem fun, or that seems boring, or seems really demanding. And we can provide this praise, it can make doing different tasks more fun. And this 10-to-1 ratio, what that is getting at, I think a lot of people, myself included, we give a lot of demands compared to the amount of reinforcement or praise that we give someone. So when we think about our kids, we want to aim for a 10-to-1 ratio. So like for every one command that you are giving your child, you're also giving 10 statements of praise. Hey, nice hands on the table. I love how you're using your inside voice. Oh, I loved how you were sharing the toys with your brother. So really hyping up the amount of praise that you're giving when you do give a demand or an instruction. And these are just some examples of using, I've been saying the word labeled praise a lot. That goes a lot further than just this non-specific praise. So instead of just saying good job pointing to the apple, or instead of saying like terrific or that was wonderful, terrific work saying your name, or nice job writing your name. Instead of just I'm proud of you, it's I'm proud of you for picking up your Legos. So you're really being specific to what the child has done. You're almost like a commentator for what you're seeing them doing, and then adding enthusiasm and praise in what you're commenting on. And you want to change it up as well, so it's not always good job pointing to the apple, good job finishing your homework, good job playing. It's, oh, I loved how you did X, Y, and Z. Oh, that was an awesome job of using your inside voice. So you changing up the descriptors that you're using to provide the label praise. Something else that we talk about when we're thinking about working on improving our child's ability to cooperate with the instructions that we give them is when we're thinking about telling a child to stop. So oftentimes parents will tell their child what not to do. What we see with our kids with developmental disabilities, that can be confusing. So they know what they're not supposed to do, but they don't know what they're supposed to do instead. So instead of saying, don't yell, it's, oh, please use your inside voice. Or instead of, don't take the toys from your sister, please share the Legos with your sister. Or instead of stop running, please use your walking feet. So really being more specific in what you want them to do helps improve that cooperation. And so whenever you're thinking about you're catching your child maybe doing something that you don't want them to do, use this as a way to practice those compliance steps that I had talked about. So getting their attention, giving the instruction of what you want them to do, and then praising them when they do it. And if needed, using that physical guidance to help them follow through with the instruction. We also use cooperation, improving cooperation for transitions. And so what can be really helpful when we're thinking about routines and transitions is that they really help with increasing predictability of a schedule or a routine. And so what we can do to help kids through these different transitions is using visual schedules, putting in times for breaks, and that actually giving them a visual of when that break is coming up. Can also, and what this really does is help them prepare for that change in routine or transition. Because I know for myself, I get really frustrated or I get really upset when I'm like deep into, I'm a video gamer. When I'm like really deep into a video game and my partner comes in and they're like, all right, it's time to go. I haven't had time to save my game. I'm really into what I'm doing. I'm really bummed that I have to turn it off. So I'm going to be a lot more frustrated versus if I have like a 10 to 15 minute warning that I need to start closing it down. I need to save the game and my progress. The same thing is true for our kids. If they're really into their Legos or they're really into their video games and we all of a sudden come in and tell them they need to shut it down, that's a lot harder to do versus if they had a warning and they can start preparing for that transition. What these rules and these schedules help to do as well is to establish expectations. So I talked at the beginning, if we're able to start establishing things from the start, it's much easier to follow. And again, a lot of children, especially with developmental disabilities, really thrive on visuals. And there will be a whole session on visual supports as well, but just giving some information right now that these visuals, so like over here on the side of the screen, it really lays out what the child's day looks like. And this is going to be different for each child. You can individualize it. and it just shows them what to expect, what the times are, when breaks or fun activities might be implemented. And what's important with using these type of schedules and these transitions is to really be consistent and follow through with them. And so that's why it might be also useful to start with like a small part of the day and build up, so it can really practice following through and helping the children get used to the new normal of what their day looks like. What schedules help with as well, I mentioned, is moving away from those more preferred activities, especially if they have to go to a non-preferred activity. So if you can give them a signal, if you can give them a warning, if you can pair it with a visual warning, such as a timer, it helps them know how much time they have left. And you can use it for a countdown for more non-preferred activities as well. So say if they're having to do a writing activity or if they're having to do math problems, they can have the timer or the visual available so they know it's not a forever thing that I'm having to work on this. There is a countdown, and then I get to do something fun after that. So you can build that into the schedule for your child as well. Providing choices of things to do can help with transitions as well. So maybe it's time to wrap up playing the video game, and it's you can help me clean the dishes, or you can work on your reading assignment for the night. So they get to have a choice of what they can do. There's still some sense of independence, but it's still choices that you're providing that seem appropriate to you, and that can help increase cooperation for instructions that you're giving. I mentioned before as well using the first then. So first we do our math problems, then you get to color in your coloring book. And this teaches them that first you're doing what I want you to do, and again, then you're getting the reward or the fun activity that you want to do. What is also important that can help with cooperation for instructions is building in breaks for children as well. So even though maybe we can sit down for 30, 40 minutes and work on something that we need to for work, it can be really hard for our kids. So maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes of work that they do, and then it's 5 minutes of getting up and stretching, moving around, 5 minutes of playing a game with you. So shortening tasks can help improve compliance. You might be working at the task for a little bit longer, but we're not having as much fight or as much back and forth about getting through that assignment. And again, I've been talking about the use of visuals can help with all the types of instructions that you might give. Timers are really helpful again for giving expectations about how long an activity is going to last, when it's going to end, and then it serves again as that transition warning. And this link up here, this time timer, it has a lot of cool different visuals that give a countdown. Like this little timer up here, as well as like a duck timer. So if there's a lot of creative things out there. So if there's a favorite animal of your child, that can be serving as the timer as well. And then this children's countdown app is just another app that is useful and more fun than just maybe a verbal warning. It gives that visual for the child. And again, the use of these visuals, the use of using a schedule is really to increase predictability and understanding for the child. It's a lot easier to follow through with instructions when we know what to expect, when we know what's coming, versus if it's just something unknown and out of the blue. So again, just to wrap up, I know that was a whirlwind for thinking about how to increase cooperation, but we have those 4 main steps that we want to go through. And it's, again, getting your child's attention, whether that be by calling their name, tapping them on the shoulder, trying to establish that eye contact with them. It's then being really specific in the instruction that you give them. So telling them exactly what you want them to do. So please, Marie, take your plate to the dishwasher. And then immediately as the child does it, you're giving that verbal praise. Oh, I loved how you listened to me on the first time I asked. I loved how you used your inside voice. So really, so that the child is learning that when I follow through on the instruction that mom, dad, or grandma gave me, I'm getting that verbal praise. And again, touched on some visuals about the use of visuals, how they can be helpful in establishing those routines and those expectations. It can help move through transitions, especially when we're moving from a task that I really enjoy to perhaps a task that's not as fun for me. Okay, so we have about 10 or 15 minutes for questions if you want to put them in the chat box, and then I can go through them.
Okay. So my question, so for instead of saying don't do something, I'm having an issue right now where my son will follow me around the house screaming. And he is on the spectrum. He's considered nonverbal. We do have touch chat, but we're not 100% with it. We're still learning it.
Right.
So usually if he starts screaming, I'll say, Link, you've got to use your words or use your talker and tell me but I wonder if that is there any other suggestions on what else I could say? Because I worry that obviously if he could use his words, I think he would. And I feel bad saying use your talker and not being able to navigate to what exactly he's trying to say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think if that's right. What about so I talked about like the first then. So it's like if you're wanting him to do something, it's like you could have pictures of that as well. So it's not just relying on the verbals, or you can give him pictures as well. So if there's something that he's wanting teaching, just as you would use like the steps to compliance, you can use that. So if there's like an array of things that he wants, whether it's snack, it's playtime, it's video games, you can do like little icons for that. And he can hand that to you, and that's letting you know it's like that little picture that he can hand to you. That's a very like slimmed down version of using like what we would call like a PEX or a picture exchange system.
Yeah, we have a textbook at home that we used before touch chat. So actually I can pull that out. I'm just not sure what he wants when he starts to follow me around screaming.
Right. And so that's hard. So if you can then start working with him having, if you've had success with that in the back, using the PEX system, he can have the array of pictures. And then as soon as he hands you one, oh, thank you so much for, if it's like telling me you want a snack. So pulling that back out could be an option as well. And then Meg, cool. If you have other ideas, if you want to jump in.
No, I completely agree with you. I think those were great suggestions.
Awesome. Okay, thank you guys so much.
For sure. Any other questions? And I think too, when you're thinking about, again, we're going to have another visuals, but like if you're thinking about creating a routine or a visual schedule, you can also like have that to where you can pull the things off as well. So if it's like we're doing snack time, the child can pull snack time off so they know this is what they're getting to do, what they're supposed to do, and then they can put it in like a done box. Same for like playtime, or if it's Lego time, you go over to the visual schedule. If it's like a Velcro and they can pull off, we get to pull off the Velcro Legos, and we get to sit down with the Legos and have our little icon next to us, and that's telling us what we get to do for that time, and then we get to hand it in when that time's all done. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with the visuals that I think would work well. If there's no other questions, we do have the email address on here for DDBP Family Support at cchmc.org if you think of any questions at a later date. And I believe this will be posted online as well if you would like to rewatch it or share it with others.